I want to start, as I always do, by acknowledging the traditional territory on which we have the privilege of being right now, Algonquin territory. As a non-Indigenous woman who's been doing work in and around the prison system and the so-called criminal justice system, it's becoming even more so-called these days, it's painfully obvious the impact of colonization on our Indigenous peoples. So at a time when we are talking about 32% or 22% of the people in Parliament being women, we're talking about Indigenous women being a third of the federal jail population when they represent 4% of the Canadian population. So that's the extent of the marginalization. And those of you who were watching the news last week will see that, in fact, Aboriginal women and those with mental health issues are the fastest growing prison population. That is not accidental, and it's very much linked to why you need the leadership and mentorship that you're talking about here, not just today, but every day. And it's why we need more women, and not just women in drag, in Parliament, in leadership positions. And what I mean by that is women who lead in men's ways or in traditionally masculine ways. And we are increasingly encouraged, certainly of my ilk, most of the women that I went to law school with who are still practicing have to work like men in drag. They have to work long hours. Many of them have forfeited having children. Many of them have forfeited having the sorts of full lives that their male partners can have because they usually have wives taking care of all of that business. So I encourage you not to say that's okay and to demand to lead in ways that are very different. I'm a slow learner, so I didn't learn that right away. So I encourage you to learn it. Some of you know I'm a geriatric mother because I didn't learn all of these things right away. And so I now have, as some of my friends are becoming grandmothers or are retiring, I still have a kid in junior high. So I encourage you to learn that before I did. I also encourage you to think about the things you need and want and what you want to do. And when I was at Dal last week, a student there at the Dalhousie Association of Women in Law said, how do you make the job you want? And it made me really think for a long time, because the perception is, and I now acknowledge, I didn't quite then, but after a week of thinking about it, I've had the privilege and the responsibility of being able to make some of the jobs I wanted. And the key, I think, was figuring out what you see as a need, an area that you have something to contribute to, and going forth and just doing it. Now, it may sound like, oh, that's easy. It's not always easy, but it certainly is more fun. It certainly creates new avenues. It certainly keeps you busy. And it certainly is rewarding in the end when you're able to forge that path and decide what you want to do. There are downsides, of course. I don't have a pension, but I also am one of the few people from my class when we got together a few years ago for our 25th anniversary who truly enjoyed every day since law school. And so that, to me, is an incredible privilege. The fact that I may not be able to retire in the same way and sit around, in fact, probably I wouldn't be doing that anyway. And when you do find something that you're truly passionate about, most of us don't ever see it as something that we will retire from. And when I see my friends who are waiting for the day that they can retire and do the things they want to do, I actually feel quite sorry for them. Because I think that the regret of not being able to pursue what you want to do because of the perception that you need other things in your life can sometimes very much limit you. And I was in danger of that. So those of you who know me, a few people have said, well, you knew what you wanted when you went to law school. No, those of you who know me know I went to law school to make money. I was a working class kid, and I looked around and I thought, how can I make money? Well, I could go be a doctor, but I'm not, I'm kind of queasy. It wouldn't be really cool if I fainted every time I tried to do an operation, so that won't be really cool. And so I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to support my family, and then I'll be fine. And somewhere along the way, of course, when you are raised or when you have a sense of your own level of privilege, it's important to recognize that at some point along the way. And luckily, I had people in law school, professors, colleagues, and when I started going to the prisons, I was taught a lot by the people who showed me the difference between even though I had come from a working class background, the level of privilege I had had by virtue of the education I had access to, the individuals who had mentored me, my family support, all of those things. And so I think recognizing that and being grateful for your privilege and recognizing the need to use that privilege to the benefit of others, not to use it to denigrate others, but to use it for the privilege of others. Now, me, least of all, would judge anybody who says, that may be all very well and good, Kim Pate, you've decided to do that, but I already have kids, or I've already come into this with some life experience, and I came here and I need to support my family, and I'm on my own, and I decide I'm going to take a job because it has security benefits. Great. Be honest about it. Be aware of what that means, and figure out other ways if you want to contribute through those who have chosen other paths. What I mean by that is, for instance, if you had told me 30 years ago that I would be looking at individuals who have chosen to work in the government as bureaucrats, and I'd be looking to them to provide information and facilitate the way that I do my work, I would say, no way, they sold out, they went off to the government. But the reality is, many of them now are the ones who provide on a daily basis, as recently as just on the weekend, related to the Omar Khadr return, information that is crucial to the work that I do. Whether it's the videos of Ashley Smith being forcibly injected in Joliet, whether it's the reports of investigations that wouldn't otherwise be available, that they provide and have the courage and conviction of their views to know that while they can't do something in their position because of the choices they've made, they have a responsibility to share it with those who can and will do something with it. And I think that the honesty of knowing that's the position they're in is something that may not have always been part of their lives, but certainly is now, and isn't part of every person's life I deal with in the government for certain. But it certainly means that we have much more likelihood of working together on a number of issues. So the piece that I feel very ill-equipped. Sorry, I'm also mental pausing, so words escape me and then come back in interesting forms. But I think it would be ill-advised, and I feel ill-equipped to tell you how to go forth in your future, because I'm not you. Each of you will have your own ideas about the path you want to follow. Each of you will know what your passion is. Each of you will know what kinds of supports you need around you and how you can move forward in the areas you want to move forward. And I encourage you to identify those, seek them out, and benefit from them. None of us does any of this work alone. Nobody. And from my perspective, the best leaders that I've worked with and benefited from their leadership are those who are very much involved in coalition building, in developing relationships with all of the individuals, including those who may have adverse ideas to yours, so that you understand those ideas and can not necessarily further them. Sometimes you understand them to counter them, but so that you can understand those ideas and move forward in the area you've chosen to. So I would encourage all of you to focus in those areas, to know that how you treat other people as you're pursuing your own objectives will very much be the way that you mentor and lead for others who you're working with. And I often will say to the young women who come in and work in our office that it's as important to me how you treat the people who serve you as it is the people who you feel you get something from. And it's a very good lesson that actually my family taught me. My father was in the enlisted ranks in the military, and yet he had in a very class-structured organization, military organization, he had a very clear view that nobody, not the general, not the private working below him, were any better or worse than he was, and that all deserved respect and all deserved to be treated well. And I think that's one of the finest lessons that I was able to achieve, in addition to being aware that every person you meet, you can learn something from. Every person, whether it's the guy who's driving you in the taxi to an appointment or the airport, whether it's the bus driver when you get on, whether it's the person serving you, and if you end up in a privileged position where you have people who can come and clean your home and do those things, it's all of those individuals will teach you.